former commanding officer had become executive to the Assistant Secretary of War, Mr. McCoy. And the Assistant Secretary was charged with helping Jackson assemble a staff. And of course, the result was that my old boss, somewhat to my dismay, nominated me. And so I had no escape, and I joined the staff. I reported for duty in late May 1945, which was just about 2 weeks after the German surrender. And I was assigned an office in the Pentagon with a certain colonel by the name of Telford Taylor. Well, I had met Telford some 12 years earlier in entirely different circumstances, but I was delighted to be joined with Taylor in this enterprise. It was absolutely wonderful. Well, I hung around for a time, and then in some curious way, I don't know quite how, probably by means of Colonel Bernays, I was deputed to act as liaison between the Jackson staff and the OSS, which had made very large promises to deliver large amounts of hard evidence.
We did.
Well, I trotted over to the OSS and had a wonderful time talking to a group of scholars, historians and political scientists, about German history and politics. There were some wonderful people there. I can remember Franz Neumann, Henry Kellerman, the young Karl Schorsky. We had a great time. And some large-scale essays resulted from this encounter. But of hard evidence, there was nothing. Obviously, Whitney was assembling it in Europe, but there was none in Washington. I'd like to make the same point that Professor Hilberg made so splendidly earlier, and that is that the whole enterprise at that time was precarious and chancy. We in Washington received word, and it was a fact, that there was terrible trouble in getting the four powers to agree on a charter. Great trouble. The staff, such as it was, the Jackson staff, was part in Washington, part in London, and part elsewhere, and there was really no coordinating management. The chief manager was, of course, none other than Robert H. Jackson. But as Taylor's wonderful book points out, Jackson had no real interest in management. He was quite a bad manager. At all events, we squeezed by. On August 8th, there was a charter. Next problem was, how do you write an indictment? Well, an indictment had to bridge at least 3 separate legal traditions. The Anglo-American, if you can call that one, the French and the Russian. In addition, we had to reconcile various viewpoints about how the case should be tried, what strategic efforts should be made. So we went to work on an indictment. This involved running back and forth between London and Nuremberg, back and forth, back and forth. If you look at the indictment itself, it's a strange instrument. The American part, the American corner, has a ghost of a resemblance to an American antitrust complaint. It really does. There were many glitches, many misunderstandings, but finally an indictment was written. It was promulgated in Berlin in the early days of October, I forget the precise date, and as a matter of bravado, a date was fixed for trial. It was November 20th. Now began the terrible task of trying to formulate, to do something, to prove themes that had never before been litigated. The Russians and the French immediately came in and said, no, we must postpone the trial. We've got to postpone the trial. But Jackson said no, he insisted, and the trial, in fact, began on November 20th. Then an awful mistake. The notion somehow got going that the way to prove the case was to prepare so-called self-proving briefs in which it would hardly be necessary to summon any witnesses. Well, of course, if that view had prevailed, all the drama would have been drained out of the trial, and the world press, which was assembled in Nuremberg, would be totally confounded. How do you report something that appears in, for the most part, German? Well, we were saved from this sin against orality chiefly by the presiding English judge, who, of course, was operating in his tradition, where trials were spoken and not written. That is about the point when I left the staff and the Army. So you see that I have only a cameo appearance in this prosecution. And I must say that as I left Nuremberg, headed for Washington, D.C., I was in a state of some alarm. How would the case be tried? How would it really be tried? What would be the outcome? This was all chancy. It was chancy. So far as anybody can be worried on the way home after 6 months, I was concerned. That showed how silly I was. What I did not understand was the lesson to me of Nuremberg, which is this: vision conquers all. Vision conquers all. And Jackson had the vision. There went before him a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. That was his concept and his dream. He saw it, even when the rest of us did not. And he was firm in the belief, I'm sure, that once this business was started, it would end, and it would end successfully. And so it was. There were many emotional highs in this prosecution. Foremost was the masterpiece of an opening speech by Justice Jackson, where the rhetoric is exactly right for this awesome occasion. There were other high emotional occasions. I thought the other day, and I must say, not without tears, of the reopening of the synagogue in Fürth, just a few miles from Nuremberg. Well, of course, the achievement of the Nuremberg case lay in the extended opinion and judgment of the court, in which Jackson's thesis was finally validated. Now, an optimistic fellow would have said that in 30 years, surely there would be some steps toward an international criminal court applying the results of Nuremberg and free of the great defect of Nuremberg, which was unequal justice, that the victors judged the vanquished. Of course, this has not happened, but maybe it will. And perhaps we'll find out in the course of this conference how that may come about.